All the second stage tanks now pressurized. Astronauts report it feels good. T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal. 12, 11, 10, 9. Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Like a furry torpedo to the jugular. This is Honey Badger Radio. Radio with bite.
Hello and welcome to HBR Talk 377, the best laid plans of UN women. I'm your host, Hannah Wallen, here with Mike Stevenson, Dr. Randomer Cam, the personification of perceptivity. And we will be looking at UN women again, obviously. Their article on how to counter the manosphere's toxic influence. We started this last week. We may skip over back and forth between some other pages here because they are doing the same thing in this article that they did in their previous article where they're referencing other things. One thing is self-reference, that they wrote it and then they're referencing it because, of course, they do that because they're feminists. But, we're still looking into their complaints against fathers' rights activists and such. Because that's who they really are against, is men who might want to raise their own children instead of being managed by the world government. But as always, we got to do what we got to do first. And remember, Honey Badger Radio dishes out a smorgasbord of thought-provoking discussions, and as experiences both recent and long past have demonstrated, the provoked thoughts are fighting back. They made it clear that for people like us, relying on third-party payment platforms like Patreon to fund our work is treading on thin ice or building our house in the path of a rapidly growing wildfire. In light of this, we strongly encourage our supporters to switch at least their support for us to feedthebadger.com, the most stable way to help us out. And if you want to tip us directly instead of relying on any social media platform's tip jar, the link for that is feedthebadger.com/justthetip. And as always, the same risk applies to our social media platforms, which is why you should further provoke the thought police by tracking our thought-provoking discussions on honeybadgerbrigade.com, where you can find your way to all of our content as well as a link to feedthebadger.com in the drop-down menu at the top of the page. And remember also at Feed the Badger, there is, if I remember correctly, a way to tip Mike directly as well. So there should be a reward for cleverness, and there it is. But in the meantime,
yeah, please do. I'm broke. I'm not clever, but I am broke. So
you are clever. That's why I asked you to be on the show as often as you could.
Well,
literally why.
I kind of invited myself to the show, and I've been here ever since. But you're very kind.
Except that I did say come as much as you want on the show.
Right.
And there is a reason, because like I said, I think your perspective is particularly important. Especially we're talking about a lot of the stuff that the world government is imposing, and this is not a government organization that the people elected. This is a government organization that previous administrators of nations that had their own war machines threw together to work in collaboration with each other, and now it is acting as an authority over those nations. So it's supposed to be more like the Student Council of Nations, and it's behaving as though it is the king of a world kingdom. And UN Women isn't even a governmental part of it. It's just a organization that gives recommendations to the UN on behalf of feminists in women's name, without the consent of most of us who are women. But Europe has been listening to them, unfortunately, and our listeners should well know from previous shows, the UK, Mike's country, has been utterly destroyed by it. It's not the only one, but I don't actually have anybody from France or Spain to tell me about what's going on there. So we definitely need our UK representative, as much as you can say anyway. Because, I know if you say the wrong thing there, you get arrested. And it's not Officer Opie. So, but in any case, speaking of this imposition on the world, the UN Women group does not like us. They do not like the men's rights movement. They do not like them Sam I Am. They would not, could not, in a boat with a goat and all that. They're very upset with us because.
Good.
Hey, Lauren. We have a
Hey.
Lauren.
I am here. Sorry for my lateness.
Glad for that. Well, it's been a month.
Yeah.
Like every single one of us has had a bunch of crap go wrong, so I kind of figured there may be something.
Honey badgers are always late. Therefore, the latest honey badger is the honey badgerist honey badger.
There we go. There we go. Sorry, guys. That came out of nowhere. And I'm not even having a bad allergy day. When I do, I don't cough at you guys. But yeah, UN Women hates our guts. And they especially hate the female MRAs, but they're going to only talk about the men because the way that they hate on us is to pretend that we don't exist. So earlier last week, we read the first couple paragraphs here about gender inequality, and they're peddling their other article and mental health impacts on boys and men. And note that they were only talking about things that incels say, and they're only talking about them as if they have no basis for saying them. So right out of the chute, one of men's biggest complaints is you have to be a 10 in order to get a woman's attention because all women think they're 10s, right? All women think that they're the hottest thing on the planet, the coolest thing since sliced bread. And therefore, they must go for the top 20% to the top 5% of men.
Is this a good place to add a hashtag not all? Because I know so many women.
Yeah, I know. Hashtag not all.
But that's because I happen to associate with a lot of women who aren't crazy. Far more women than you would expect rate themselves as 10s. This is the impression you can get if you listen to the Whatever podcast a lot, but let's not say that the Whatever podcast is not representative of an alarmingly large amount of women. And yes,
I talk about other women like this, and then I think of myself as different, but to be honest, I married the handsomest guy in the world, so I also and definitely am not a 10, especially not now. But yeah, that's not representative of all women, but all women do have a degree of, they're taught growing up, shop around. They're taught growing up to have a little bit of hypergamy going on, and that was one that I had to fight because, my parents did the same thing in terms of, well, you should marry an earner so that you're supported. But at the same time, my dad came from a home where his mom didn't have that situation. She was the breadwinner of their family all of her life until she got lots of cancer and passed away. And so he also insisted that I be capable of supporting myself and a family, because what if, right? What if lightning strikes? What if car accidents happen? What if I made bad choices in partner? But I did marry the handsomest guy in the world. And, I don't have to carry the load all by myself like she did.
Well, it's simply not possible, so it's because I am the handsomest guy in the world.
Oh, no.
I would have to agree.
My husband is the handsomest guy in the world. You guys just don't know.
And that's me being satirical. I don't think I'm a 10. I think I'm a 0 because I refuse to play this game.
Every guy underestimates his looks, I swear.
No, I'm not underestimating. I'm just refusing to play this game, and so I'm 0 by default. That's what everyone should do, in my opinion. Refuse to play this fucking game.
Well, and to that end, I would have to say that yes, not all, but it's the exception that proves the rule.
Yeah, in this situation, the fact that the exception is the exception really does.
Yeah.
And women are always looking for a dude that earns a lot of money. They're always looking for a dude that's better looking than they are, right? They're always looking for a dude that's bigger and stronger than they are, taller than they are. Let's see, what other rules did I break? Well, okay, so the one thing that they don't always look for is a dude that's smarter than they are. And as handsome as my husband is, that still is the thing that really, really flipped my switch, was that he's smarter than I am. And I quite enjoy that.
Yeah.
And quite a bit. But in any case, all that aside, this thing that we looked at last week, started talking about this last week, the only thing that they mention here is looks maxing communities and how they subject men's photos to brutal commentary, right? Women engage in a behavior. Men work their asses off to accommodate that behavior, and then it's men's fault if that has a negative impact on men. That is UN Women's assessment. Women reject guys if they have things like a unibrow or a chubby face, or some women will even reject dad bods, right? Which I don't understand, because dad bods are cuddly. But like, women will reject the dumbest things. I only want a guy with blue eyes, or he has to be 6 feet tall or over, even though I'm only 5'1.5".
Oh, you can't say blue eyes. That's definitely racist, because there's a certain race that has blue eyes.
There are actually dark-skinned people with blue eyes.
But it's pretty rare.
Very rare.
It's white coded, so you can't say it.
Yeah. I've known girls that will only date guys with blue eyes, which is I think is dumb, because I think brown eyes are pretty attractive too, and hazel. It's window to what the person is thinking. I don't necessarily buy into the whole window to the soul thing, but they are the window to what the person is thinking, and it's kind of cool to be able to see that. But so I don't think there's a more attractive eye color. But in any case, like, there's women will do all kinds of stuff like that, and then complain when guys are hypercritical about their own looks. As if guys did this to themselves. At the same time, the female-run, female-driven beauty industry that has to change every little thing about women at the cost of like between $150 and $300 a month on supplies, that somehow is men's fault. Those beauty standards that women push on each other are somehow men's fault. And that is, in a nutshell, like, they're essentially, their first statement on how to get rid of us is to ignore us and only talk about things that they think they can get people to hate. These men are tearing each other down. And in particular, things they can get women to hate, because other guys are going to be like, yeah, so. But when you talk to women about this, they're going to get upset. They're going to think these guys are in trouble. They're going to think these guys are the cause of all-male suicide and so on. Not going to consider the fact that these guys are doing this because they're already experiencing social rejection and they're trying to figure out how to stop that from happening. Nope, they're just bad. How dare they try to improve their looks? How dare they talk about what needs improvement or what they think needs improvement? And at the same time, if you suggest that maybe women shouldn't have such brutal standards in the first place, and then guys wouldn't subject each other to that type of criticism, here's what you need to change, because this is what women like, then you're a misogynist. So the upshot then is what? Women should have the highest of high standards, but how dare men try to meet those standards? What the fuck is wrong with those guys? That makes sense, doesn't it?
We encountered, even when we tried to talk to normies about this. This happened over that one Christmas when we tried to have that X space with anyone who joined it, and we were encountered by several men who much like when Brian and Alison tried to talk to this to these normies on this stream, and we keep encountering this like, look, if women have high standards, you should just meet those standards. You can't just blame women for having these high standards. You just need to meet these high standards. And I'm like, okay, yep, I can see where you're driving at, because you're trying not to fall down to the floor, but I'm like, you're trying to rise up to the ceiling. So I have to ask, what would the world look like if women's standards were too high? And this is a conditional hypothesis, and that makes it very that blows the minds of dare I say low IQ people who can't entertain a conditional hypothesis. But what would the world look like if women's standards were too high? And I just have to ask this to the average normie. Like, imagine, just blue sky thinking for a moment. What if women's standards were too high? How would that present as a series of applicable descriptions in the world? What would that look like? And people have trouble describing this without describing the world as it is right now. Because yeah, it's obvious exceptions, like the handful of non-crazy women that I talk to, and obvious exceptions of the clinically narcissistic women out there. But the average woman is not the same average woman that they were 100 years ago, let alone 1,000 years ago. Like, women's standards have risen as feminism has risen, as romantic chivalry has risen, and not just in the last 100 years, but in the last 1,000 years. So, like, what would it look like if women's standards were too high? Answer me that, normies. Because it kind of looks like what we have right now. It kind of looks like how on Tinder, like, women rate 80% of men as below average. It would look something like that, wouldn't it? And we should be looking as to how we bring that number down rather than up. Because if we keep going the way we're going, then 10 years from now, it'll be 90% of men who are below average looks, and then 95. And before you know it, literally every man will be below average. How's that possible? How is 80% possible? It should be 50%. That's how averages work. It should be 50% of men are below average, but we're already at 80. So why is it so crazy to conceive of the idea that 100% of men will be considered below average in the looks department by the average woman? And that's what we're arriving at, and we're practically at that point of this case, because it's not just about a man's looks, is it? It's about how much fucking dollar he's got, and they would twist their brains into saying, that even the ugliest man in the world, as long as he's a billionaire, is a 10. And even the best looking man in the world, as long as he's not a violent criminal, is a 0. Because then you have to deal with that weird fetish that far too many women have, that they want violently criminal men who are capable of serial killing anyone but you, milady.
Yeah, that one always gets me because they'll compete for the top 20%, but then they want to go fuck the guy with teardrop tattoos on his face and gang symbols and all kinds of stuff on his arms and what have you, and it's like, yeah, but the top 20% guy doesn't want you if you've been sleeping with that other dude.
Yeah.
And it's not because he thinks you're immoral. It might be. It might be a little bit because he thinks you're untrustworthy, but more it's because it's unhygienic. It's because you might have picked up something from that other guy. And that's gross. Right? And it's not misogynistic to recognize that there are STIs that half the population statistically is a risk to anybody that might be sleeping around, and that you're more likely to run into the part of the population that's a risk, a transmission risk, when you start engaging with people who maybe engage with IV drug users and prostitutes and people who maybe have a high body count. Even if you don't, even if your body count before the guy is 1, before your partner, you still, if your body count is 1 jailbird or 1 gang member, right, 1 bottom of the barrel guy whose lifestyle is dangerous and includes dangerous women, then you've just subjected your future partner to contact with that dangerous guy and whatever dangerous women he's been with. Like this is stuff that should be elementary. We were learning this in high school. Gen X was learning this in high school in the 1980s. The idea that when you sleep with a person, you're essentially, hygienically, you're sleeping with every person that person has ever been with. Because that's how that works in terms of STI transmission, especially with STIs that take a while to manifest. Like HIV can take like 3 years to show up in your system. It might be in there hiding for 3 years, and it might be contagious, and you wouldn't know you had it. And it might not show up on a blood test, and it still can be passed to your partner. Right? People don't always tell you that they have something like herpes or HPV. People don't even always know that they have HPV. Usually they know if they have herpes. That apparently is painful or something. But yeah, people don't always tell you that they have something like that. And similarly, there are other things happening now, antibiotic resistant bacteria, for instance, that are scary as fuck. And I think I've described this a couple of times on this show and other shows, but there are bacteria that have created an enzyme in their evolution to try to survive the antibiotics that we throw at them. They've created an enzyme that they fire off at the molecules of whatever chemicals we put in our bodies to kill them. And it chemically reacts with our antibiotics and changes them to some other non-antibiotic substance and water. So it's a hydrolyzing enzyme. and it makes it harmless to the bacteria. So it's useless to you because the bacteria that's infected you doesn't die. Then it continues to do whatever it's doing that you're having symptoms from. And our scientists have come up with a 2-pronged attack in a drug that goes after first the enzyme and then the bacteria. But there are now some bacteria that are immune to those. And this is a hot war. This is an actual hot war with enzyme missiles and smart bombs, basically, that we're firing off at the bacteria. And in the context of that, one of those devastatingly dangerous and completely resistant to all different types of antibiotics bacteria is an E. coli bacteria. It lives in your lower intestine, and that's present in hospitals. And it's all over the place. There is a super yeast infection that is living in things like if you get they had to do it to people with COVID. You get tube put in your lungs so you can breathe. Intubated, if you have to get intubated. Some of those, they're having difficulty cleaning the yeast infections off of them. Mm-hmm. And like the stuff that usually kills yeast is not killing this yeast. So, the ultimate death of humanity might not be aliens or nuclear bombs or starvation, climate change, none of that. It might be a massive humanity-wide freaking yeast infection. But among the rest of that is a antibiotic-resistant form of gonorrhea. And I guess there's now an antibiotic-resistant. I said the other day it would be really scary if this happened with syphilis. Then somebody messaged me, it already has. There's an antibiotic-resistant form of syphilis. You should all read up on what syphilis does. It's scary. And so this idea that dudes who are like, no, I don't want to be with somebody who has slept around a lot are somehow being misogynistic. No, that's self-defense. Okay? That's being wise. Women should have the same attitude, both about themselves, I don't want to be the person that slept around, and also toward you, because they have a risk as well. And the smart thing for a woman is, just the same thing as for a man. Try not to, try to wait till you're married. Try not to screw around with everything that moves, like the sexual revolution said you can. And wait till you're married and then stay within the marriage. And you're much more likely to avoid being a casualty of the war between medical science and bacteria. Yeah, the Chud King says Al Capone got syphilis and died of it. It's a horrible death. It's not. It's a flesh-eating bacteria, but it's not just a flesh-eating bacteria. It also makes you suffer from insanity, senile dementia. It fucks up everything.
That's what happened to Henry VIII and to so many things. Henry VIII kind of exploded in his coffin. Or he was some king or other. He exploded in his coffin because he was bloated from the syphilis. That's one of the things syphilis can do to you. It's a bloody good thing we essentially cured it. Did we cure it? We found a way around.
No, unfortunately, antibiotics treated it.
Do they?
Yes, unfortunately, yes. Antibiotics treated it for a long time, but like I said, there's an antibiotic resistant version of it now. So this is like I said, people should be very careful who they have sex with. People should be very careful about their intimacy, even if you don't care about the oxytocin factor, which changes the way you think about the person when you sleep with them, even once. It's more addictive than heroin. It It affects you in ways that you don't consciously take note of, and it makes you vulnerable, which, if you're in a loving, trusting, mutually supportive relationship with your partner, that vulnerability is okay. But if you're with a stranger, it's not. And when you rip that apart, by going off to be with somebody else, and especially if you catch feelings and the other person doesn't, there's psychological damage that takes place that you don't necessarily take conscious note of either, but you experience it, and it changes you, and it affects your future relationships, whether you're male or female. So one of the things I strongly disagree with a lot of the game theory promoting pickup artist types and red pill dudes, the idea that it's okay for women, or not okay for women to sleep around, but it is okay for men to sleep around. The thing they're wrong about is, no, it's not okay for men to sleep around either. It's not okay for anybody to sleep around. It's a very bad idea, and nobody should do it. And this is something that, if you're a parent, the smartest thing you can do for your kids, besides straight talk about future finances, is be very blunt with them about this information, and get them to understand that it's not just fun to have sex. It's also high risk, vulnerable, and creates an attachment. So besides the risk of pregnancy, they're putting their bodies at risk, and they're putting their minds at risk. And so, it's different when, like I said, when you're in a loving, trusting relationship and somebody wants to take care of you and you want to take care of them. That's a whole different story. And the risk isn't the same, and that bond just makes your marriage stronger, right? But when you're not, and you end up hurting each other. And it's one of the reasons why there's often so much bitterness between partners that, they break up when they're young. And all these women that tell you about all their toxic ex-boyfriends, I'll bet that guy wasn't toxic while they were sleeping with him. It was only after that stopped that all of a sudden everything about him was wrong. Right?
Yeah. That's why for all this talk we hear about how it's societally considered okay for men to sleep around but not for women to sleep around. Well, that's largely based on the men who are in charge of things. It's because men have always been in charge of things for political reasons or whatever. And it's largely because, especially in modern times, that sleeping with a woman or any amount of women is considered a status symbol for men, because women's sexuality is considered pure and innocent and a gift, something to be thankful for, whereas men's sexuality is toxic and corrupt, and it should be something that should be avoided. So these societal rules we have in the advent of romantic chivalry, otherwise known as misandry, has guided women in the right direction and men in the wrong direction. Like whether you're a prince or a pauper, or a princess or a pauper, there are rules that should apply in both cases. Like you should have as few sexual partners as possible. Regardless of the antibiotics that we have these days, that can save, or at least mitigate the possibilities of hideous STD-based diseases and deaths. Like, it's still generally good advice for men and women to have as few sexual partners as possible, no matter what's going on politically, or who's in charge, or who is afforded the opportunity to have multiple sexual partners. And yes, maybe there will always be a bit of a skewing in that direction, because after all, men are attracted to female virgins and women are not attracted to male virgins. And I don't know how we change that. That seems to be an evolved thing, and we could get into that for fucking hours as to how that happened or how we deal with that. But we can deal with this discrepancy in both cases by saying, men and women, please, for the love of God or whatever you believe in, have as few sexual partners as possible. Because, I mean, it's good advice in general, with or without STDs. But in the existence of STDs, especially the ones to which we have not yet found a cure or a prevention, just fucking don't be whores. And yes, that includes men. Don't be whores either. That's one of these fucking traditions we have for a fucking good reason. It just needs to be applied to men as well. And the fact that it hasn't been applied to women in the modern day just presented women with the same danger that men have been presented with for such as long. Because men have been presented with this idea that you should have sex with as many women as possible so that you can pass on your seed, and so. But that makes you no less susceptible to any STDs except chlamydia, because that's the one that affects women worse than men. But then there's gonorrhea, which affects men worse than women, and there's a whole fucking bunch of these that affect men and women differently in different ways. But they're all awful. Just don't be a fucking whore.
You do not want to have to be tested for gonorrhea. I will tell you right now, you do not want to have to be tested for gonorrhea, because I know how that test is done. If you look up how that test is done, it will make you hurt just to read it. So
scraping,
like all this
scraping.
Yes,
it's not a pleasant experience for anyone. But men have a longer urethra than women do, so it's more unpleasant for men. So here we have so here we have the situation where, I think part of the reason that incel communities exist now, and they are so big, is this normalization of risky, indiscriminate sexual behavior. And, once upon a time, that wasn't normal. It wasn't normal for unmarried people to engage in rampant, wanton, indiscriminate, widespread sexual behavior. And part of it was because they didn't have the effective birth control that we have today. But a lot of it was because we didn't have antibiotics. We didn't have vaccines. Heck, even when I was in high school, there was no HPV vaccine when I was a teenager. Right? When I was a teenager, AIDS was a death sentence. They didn't have a treatment for it that could preserve your life for years and years. Right? And people who got it died from pneumonia. And if they didn't die from pneumonia, they went through a similar death in some ways to syphilis. You got lesions on your brain and became senile. So it was not a time where, this shit wasn't scary. It was scary. And that was the end of the 20th century. Prior to that, like historically throughout earlier history, you had people being much, much more careful. Yes, Benjamin, I do see you. And, you wanted me to talk about herpes. Herpes, that's another thing. There is some indication that there are cancers related to herpes. There are definitely cancers related to HPV, which is a herpes family virus. It's in herpes, chickenpox, cold sores, and HPV, and there's some other viruses that are in that family. And it's my personal suspicion that if one of them, which we know 2 of them at least, have some relationship to cancer, that probably all of them do, all of the herpes family. And so I think those are dangerous viruses. HPV can be deadly without, you're not going to die of genital warts, but you might die of throat cancer, or you might die of a genital cancer. And if you're female, the scary thing about it is when you get it on your cervix, you don't have any symptoms. And it'll start out as a little tumor like the size of the lead of a pencil, and then it'll grow to maybe the size of a sweet pea. That's, and you can get it. You don't have to have HPV to get that. I had that, and I don't have HPV, but it's significantly more likely if you have HPV, and I think most people who do get it have HPV. But in any case, it will suddenly, go from that little teeny weeny pea-sized tumor without warning to just taking over your whole reproductive system rapidly. And it can go from 0 to stage 4 so fast that you don't even get tested for it before it's too late to get treated for it, and you end up dying from it. When I had that little tumor, the only reason we found it was because I was pregnant, and so I was in for prenatal care, and they did the usual female tests and everything, because I had chosen to not go to the doctor for like 10 years. I don't like going to the doctor. I spent like my whole childhood in hospital, so I don't spend as very much time at the doctor's office now. But if I hadn't been pregnant, we wouldn't have found it, and I wouldn't be here, because it was the rapid developing kind. And so it was so easy for me. They got it all with the biopsy. I didn't have to go through chemo. I didn't have to go through radiation. I didn't have to be scared. I had to go do the female tests every 6 months for 7 years. It was my punishment for skipping the annual one for 10 years. But aside from that, that was it, man. And I don't know. Richard Bier says, is monkeypox a pox virus or a herpes family? I'm not sure. I know, like, smallpox, I think, is a herpes virus, so monkeypox might also be a herpes virus. From the pictures I've seen, it looks like one, but that doesn't necessarily mean it is. But it's the same family of viruses. That it really, I kind of suspect the explosion of skin cancer, over the years, before everybody started using sunscreen, was probably contributed to by those chickenpox parties that the baby boomers had with my generation when we were kids, so that we would just get it at the age where we were least likely to be harmed by it, because they didn't know, But in any case, like, there's all of that, just this idea that that humans were made to just have wild, rampant, indiscriminate sex and then split up from each other and move on to another partner over and over again. It's a wrong idea, and it's damaging to both sexes. And women have their repercussions from it, and men have theirs. And I think the incel community is one of those repercussions. The fact that there's a whole segment of the population that has been left out of this behavior because of different things. Some of them are intellectually disabled. A lot of them are autistic. Many of them are disabled physically, have at least some degree of what other people would look at and see as a deformity. And I mean, like, I'm not just talking about unattractive facial features. I'm talking about, like, years ago, I had a boyfriend that had one of his pectoral muscles never grew. So one side of his chest was completely flat. That happens with women too. A lot of times women will be given a surgery. He wasn't given a surgery, so he had a muscle on one side and a flat chest on the other side. And I guess some women are picky about stuff like that. This guy was a great guy. He wasn't the guy, but I mean, we parted on good terms, and he moved on to somebody else, and I believe he got married. But today, women are very picky about stuff like that, and they can be downright bitchy about it. And that's minor. Some guys have a really rough time. There are 2 levels below the bottom rung of the social ladder that are populated. The first one down is populated almost exclusively by guys, and the bottom one is exclusively guys. And that's who is in the incel community, is those guys that don't know how to socialize very well, or guys that maybe they're way too short or way too skinny, or have a sweating problem, or all kinds of different things. And because they see everybody else engaging in this crazy ass behavior that everybody has made normal, it does damage to them too. And it's not something where I say, well, how dare you sleep with people because this other guy is going to be sad. It's the psychology of this normalizing a behavior that is unhealthy and dangerous, and making it look like not only is it normal, but it's a requirement for you to be considered normal, and it's supposed to be fun and important to people's lives. Then you have a whole segment of the population that's left out of it. That's very damaging. So,
yeah, there's a reason.
What do women do? They demonize them for it.
Yeah, there's a reason that most animal species, if not damn near all animal species, that haven't gone extinct to this day, gravitate to either a tournament situation or a pair bonding situation. Is because they're the safest ways of doing these things. Tournament because it's one male and a whole bunch of females, or I guess in a bunch of insect species, one female and a bunch of males, or pair bonding. And this is why apes evolved from tournament to pair bonding, with apparently a very narrow pathway in between the two. Because the only other alternative is what we have in the modern age, where everyone's just fucking everyone. there's a very
and
good
not
reason.
having the babies.
Well, yeah, the good reason we have that no species exists where everyone just fucks everyone all the time is because of STDs. Because nature is always fighting this arms war, and that includes the various bacteria and viruses that are always vying to try and get from body to body. And any species that devolves into everyone fucking everyone by these various viruses and bacteria that are always hoping to jump from body to body as quickly as they possibly can. And cultural and societal norms where everyone shouldn't fuck everyone all the time. Because if we did have these societal norms, we would fucking die. Our species would fucking die at the hands of all of these viruses and bacteria that are just jumping at the chance of this happening so that they can kill us all. Seems kind of obvious, doesn't it?
Well, that spaceship that's headed here from what's it called, 31 Atlas or whatever, they're gonna destroy the planet anyway. So, it makes me think of Weird Al Yankovic's "Happy Birthday," but where he says finishes up something about things being irrelevant because we're all gonna die. But my point on this is, like, we have this whole complicated factor around this community, that the contributing factors to their existence as a community, the contributing factors to their personal circumstances, and the contributing factors to their psychology, those all get ignored, right? The fact that women's standards are the reason why they so brutally criticize each other's looks, that gets ignored. And what is it? Oh, it's unrealistic definitions of manhood being imposed by the manosphere on men, promoting anxiety, self-harm, and risky behaviors. It has absolutely nothing to do with the fact that all of society is geared toward making them think there's something wrong with them if they don't engage in probably one of the unhealthiest behaviors that humanity has adopted throughout our entire history, besides war. And similarly, like harmful gender attitudes and social norms. And they accuse us of amplifying sexist stereotypes and harmful social norms with limited accountability because we have anonymity, right? So harmful stereotypes, right? Like the stereotype that women should be so afraid of men that they'd rather run into a literal biological killing machine in the woods, a predatory, meat-eating, omnivorous, in fact, it might eat your clothes too, killing machine, rather than a guy, because guys are so scary, despite the fact that violent crime perpetration is representative of less than 1/10 of 1% of the male population in the world over the age of 15. 1/10 of 1%.
Have we done crocodile versus man? I want to see how that plays out. If you happen to be in a North Australian swamp or somewhere in an African swamp, would you rather encounter a saltwater crocodile than a man? I just want to see what women say. I want to take this experiment as far as we can possibly take it. If you happen to be in coastal waters, would you rather encounter a great white shark than a man? I just want to see what women say, because I get the most horrible feeling that they'll say, "Oh yeah, a great white shark. Definitely a great white shark would be better than a man," because you don't know what a man's gonna do. You know exactly what a great white shark's gonna do. He's gonna bite you in half and then
eat your fucking face off.
Eat you in like 3 bites. Whereas a man, I don't know what it is. He's going to do patriarchy on you, and that's surely worse than a great white shark eating you in 3 pieces. Like, fucking hell.
The evil man might take you out and pay for your dinner, and then you might have to tell him that's nice and all, but you're not going back to his apartment with him. But you'd like to take him out next week. Yeah, most women won't do that part.
No.
Not at all. That's my challenge. Your homework, if you're female and you're listening to this and you're dating somebody, treat him. Take him out. And treat him to something that, he might pick if he was going to just go out by himself and do it. Like, a lot of guys are into cars or mechanical things, or, a lot of guys are into anime, a lot of guys are into comic books, Go to something like that. Go to something that is one of his hobbies. Get tickets to his favorite band a performance of his favorite band, and treat him and see what happens, because it's a lot of fun to watch the response. It is, except once in a while it's a little overwhelming for a guy. There was an incident I once in my history where, a guy was like, "Why are you being so nice to me?" And then he cried. I felt so bad for a minute. But once the overwhelming aspect of it got done, and I mean, like, it's because it's overwhelming because that happens to them so rarely. We get pampered like that all the time. Oh, I want to take you to. I know you like this singer. I want to take you to hear this singer sing. All right, you said you wanted to see this movie. Well, let's go this weekend. There's this fancy new restaurant I want to take you to. And women will be flattered and have a good time, and they'll do their best to make sure the guy knows they had a good time and everything. They'll be on their best behavior. Sometimes they'll be on their worst behavior. But how often do you reciprocate? Really reciprocate and take him someplace, pay for his meal, and get tickets to something that he would like to do, not something that you want him to like to do, but something he would like to do. And because it is so rare, it can be that overwhelming. And but like the rest of the night was a blast, and it was so much fun. And yeah, it is a lot of fun.
We went to see one time we went to see Queens of the Stone Age.
Awesome.
We both happened to love that band, and then last year, was it this year, Mike? We went to go see Primus, and I surprised him both times.
August, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, and just the look on his face was just priceless. It was worth all of the effort and everything. So
yeah. It's a great experience for both of you, and if he's been treating you, he deserves it anyway. So yeah. But yeah, this idea of sexist stereotypes, right? That generalization of that one minus, under 0.1% that is criminally violent. And by the way, one of the starkest differences between criminally violent men and all of the other men in the world who are not criminally violent is that criminally violent men, for one reason or another from their history, or sometimes because of genetics and birth injuries, are fucked in the head. Right? There is a different mental pattern, and there's even a different pattern in, like, when they look at the brain, when they do MRIs, and they can actually see which part of the brain is having reactions and everything. It's as different between criminally violent people and ordinary guys that are just living their lives and doing their best, as it is between people with physical brain damage from brain injuries and people with healthy brains. It's that different. And so to generalize those extremely different guys to the rest of the guys is an incredibly harmful stereotype. It not only does it damage the reputation of men and create animosity toward men and put them in a state of having to defend themselves because they're being defamed, and make them, if it affects the ego as well, right, their self-esteem, and causes men to feel like they have something to make up for that isn't even their fault, right? But it also teaches women not to defend themselves, not to have situational awareness, not to be able to tell the difference between a predator and someone who isn't going to do anything to them or might even help them if a predator comes after them. And so that's bad as well. And it prevents women from being able to tell the difference between a potential partner who would be a good father versus a potential partner who would not. So it's harmful to children. But feminists do that anyway, right? And this organization that is upset about harmful gender attitudes and social norms toward women does that. They promote the idea that domestic violence is something that men do and women experience, that it's widespread, pervasive, and can be generalized to the male population at large as a behavior. And they're pushing for legislation that relies on the Duluth model of handling domestic violence, which draws on patriarchy theory and dictates that authorities and help systems for victims presume domestic violence to be something that the male population does to the female population as a form of patriarchal dominance, oppression, and control. But that's not a harmful stereotype or gender attitude, is it?
Well, we live in a society. Again. But we live in a society in which predation is based on abstraction more than it's based on physicality. Because back in the Stone Age, in the Paleolithic, whatever it was, when predation was based on physicality, it was based on the monsters that we lived with, like bears and crocodiles and great white sharks, mostly land animals. But you know what I mean. And
yeah.
And we've ejected most of that from our society, especially in Britain, where we've killed all the bears and the wolves, and now looking out for predators is a whole different set of game theory, dare I say. Now that we live in a society, we live with predators who are gaming the system of this society. That they have to get through the psychological barriers before they can get through the physical barriers. Not that we don't still live with monsters who don't give a shit about the psychological barrier, especially nowadays. Now that we have infinite 50 IQ shadow beasts from Pakistan wandering around who have the lowest barrier of psychological walls to get over, because they think they can just go, you, me, you're beautiful, me, you have babies, me, fuck you, me, you have, and all this bullshit. But at the same time, there are still intelligent psychopaths, and yeah, I know that sounds like I'm making it sound like there are psychopaths who are more intelligent than other people, but there are. This is something I don't like to address, but a great deal of psychopaths who need to be put in high security prison are highly intelligent, and that's how they become successful serial killers and serial rapists in the first place, because they are able to
manipulate people.
They're able to get around these psychological barriers in the same way physical predators are able to get around physical barriers.
Yeah, the good thing is that the overwhelming majority of psychopaths are not in that group. They're dumb enough to get caught. But the ones that are in that group, it's a scary combination to have an extremely high IQ and a total lack of conscience in the same person. Very, very dangerous.
And yes, a great deal of them are female.
Yep.
Should we address this? I'm talking about these people who are able to get over these psychological barriers. It's a lot easier for women. It's a lot more natural for women. It seems to be ingrained in them, dare I say, evolutionarily, to get through the walls of men's psychology. It's a lot easier than it is for men to get through the walls of women's psychological walls. Because men are much more physical and women are much more psychological. Well, in different ways, these are the avenues through which these predators have able to evolve themselves. And yes, even back in the Stone Age, there were female psychopaths who were able to manipulate males, despite those women being idiots, and despite those males being idiots. Even female idiots have a leg over when it comes. Possibly not the best phrasing, but yeah, they had this ability to get over men's psychology in a way that men weren't able to get over women's. Men have always been more physically strong than women, but women have always been, I don't want to say psychologically strong. Well, I do, because that's what strength is. It's just this ability to get over hurdles. And women have always had this over men. We've evolved this way, where women can affect men psychologically and emotionally and pheromonally. Let's not forget, in ways that men can't do. Evolution has set us up for this. The way that women's tears can affect men psychologically and emotionally, in a way that women don't give a shit about men's tears.
Well, and women's tears come out easier than men's.
Yeah.
In adolescence, men's tear ducts change. Boys' tear ducts change. And it does become physically harder for them to cry. This is one of the reasons why it's such an abusive thing for feminists to say that the reason that male suicide rates are so much higher than women's is that men don't cry enough. They can't cry at the drop of a hat the way feminists do. Most men can't do that. Occasionally you'll find a guy whose tear ducts remained equally developed and didn't change, but most of the time, dudes don't have the capacity to cry as easily as women, to be triggered to tears as easily as women. And it's probably an evolutionary thing as well. We have that whole neoteny thing going for us. And, a woman who has a more neotenous face, and when she turns on the waterworks, it is designed and packaged to pull on your heartstrings. And it doesn't just pull on the heartstrings of men, it pulls on the heartstrings of other women too. So it's something that, it's not, it's biological. It's not just a psychological thing. But yeah, this idea that, because men handle pain and suffering differently than women, part of it is, the lack of compassion that boys face growing up. They learn that if they need relief from something, or they have a problem that they need a solution to, it's on them to find that solution or get that relief, or they have to tough out the problem because the adults around them aren't going to coddle them the way that they coddle girls. And, girls, on the other hand, learn to go to an adult for help. And as they become adults themselves, they learn to treat males as more adult than themselves, even if those males are still boys. And that's where you end up with these pedophile school teachers that are like in their early to mid 20s that rape their students and then blame them. They blame the victim for their predatory behavior because they've learned to treat male as synonymous with more adult and female as synonymous with less adult. And they're very dangerous because of that. And it's something that if we don't do something about that, in the histories of violent criminals, and in particular violent sex offenders, there's a much higher rate of having been victimized sexually or having been abused by a woman than in the rest of the population. It's not a high rate as in necessarily always proven to be more than 50%, but there's a disproportionate percentage. And so that indicates that is a significant contributing factor. And so, even if you don't care that these people, that their lives are destroyed when they become criminals, or that the victims that they affect are harmed, the fact that our society ends up having to pay, for containment and penalties and therapies and stuff like that because of that, you should be at least upset that your tax dollars are being used up by these women. Like, even if you don't have compassion for the individuals that they've harmed. But you should have compassion for the individuals that they've harmed, unless you're a psychopath. But yeah, harmful gender attitudes and social norms. Only men do that, right?
Every species maxes out certain stats, to put it in gamer terms, that can develop their evolutionary niche. Because we all evolve into niches where we max out our health stats or our mobility stats or our camouflage stats or whatever it is.
Or you get a super not long neck like a giraffe so that you can eat food nothing else can reach.
Exactly. And all these species are in danger of, if they become too successful, they just continue maxing out these stats, even if they encounter environmental constraints or non-constraints, where they become so successful that their blessing becomes a curse, if you will, where giraffes' necks become too long, or cheetahs become too fast, that they can't, they have no stamina or whatever. And this is the problem with humans. We've maxed out our compassion stats, our gynocentric compassion stats, that we've reached this point where we're like, we don't know how to turn back. We don't know how to turn off this evolutionary niche that has made us so successful. And arguably, this is what religions are for. This is what mythologies are for. That people encounter these problems that these evolutionary niches have brought us into, and the only way to turn back, because it takes millions of years for evolution to turn this shit off, and when we get into a situation that humans are into, where we advance thousands of years at a time, if not hundreds of years at a time, we are advancing so quickly, societally and civilizationally, that we can't appeal to evolution to turn this off, because it's going to take millions of years. And this is why I guess it's helpful that our evolutionary niche involves our brains, and our brains are able to write things down. We write things down like these religious books that we have, to sort of to tell people, look, you really need to wind this shit back, in the event that you can. And this is why we have stories like Adam and Eve. This is why we have stories like all that shit in the Bible, like Sodom and Gomorrah, about, be fucking careful, not to go this far. And that's the best we can do. And this is society fighting against evolution, and it's always going to be an upward battle. And this is why it's such an upward battle for us here at Honey Badger Radio, and indeed here in the dare I say, the men's rights movement, that we're trying to put some kind of societal barriers in place to push back against this evolutionary niche we have, where we have these huge brains that make sure we protect women at all costs. And when I say at all costs, I mean at the cost of men. And
children.
And children. And if we don't push back against that, it will be our downfall. And it's already looking ominously like it is going to be our downfall. And, I'm not saying we're trying to create a religion I'm just like, we're trying to write down as much shit as we can. We're, you know, in the modern age equivalent, we're trying to do as many podcasts as we can to try and let people know. Look, I know we are evolutionarily set up to do the things we're doing, and I don't want to run into too much shit about saying that we're naturally gynocentric. I don't think we are necessarily that naturally gynocentric, but there's a seed. There's a seed in there somewhere that has been taken too far. And we're just here to tell people, we've taken that seed too far. We can pull it back to that seed, and only back to that seed, where we're like, yes, we know it's important to have compassion for women, but it's also important that we have compassion for men. I think we also have the seed of compassion for men. I think that's also something that's taken us this far, but that's the seed we've forgotten. The seed we've germinated is the gynocentric seed. And I think it's perfectly possible for us to continue to germinate that seed, but to also plant a few seeds of, what's even the word? Androphilia. Have you ever heard that word before? How many people have even heard that word before? Androphilia. What is that a thing? Yeah, that's a thing. Having love for men. What? Yeah. Let's see if we can have love for men in the same way we have love for women. No? Yes? Oh, am I gay? I sound like a fucking gayer, don't I? Whatever.
If we don't start having that, we're gonna see our species die off.
Yeah.
Like we are barely as a species reproducing faster than we are dying off right now, and we are slowing. Our reproduction is slowing down worldwide. There are nations where it's not slowing down, but there are more nations where it is, and a lot of it is because we have full beyond compassion for women. We have deference, which is not the same as compassion, right? And a good example of this is what some guys call the peace tax, right? Your wife, girlfriend, mom, sister, some woman at work, whatever, does or says something that if a dude did it, you would call him on it, you'd correct him, and he'd say, oh, okay. Or you might have a little bit of an argument, but if you proved your case, then he would concede and adjust, because that's what most of the time guys do. Occasionally there are guys that don't. There are guys that'll argue the point even though they know they're wrong. But women do it all the time. And on top of that, if you do prove her wrong, she's going to hold it against you like you've committed a crime, rather than rescuing her from being wrong permanently. Like, you get a choice when you're wrong, right? You can be wrong for a few minutes and then learn something and go on not being wrong anymore because now you know the correct information. Or you can be wrong forever and die on that hill, which is stupid, but that's what women do. And how dare you, say that they are wrong, and how dare you pull them off of that hill even while it's being struck by 1,000 bolts of lightning, because that hill belongs to them and they have every right to it, and they'll fry if they want to fry. It's their party, and they'll fry if they want to, right? So the peace tax is when men hold their tongue. They don't, mansplain about something that women think they know when they're wrong. And when you pay the peace tax, you are giving up a bit of yourself. You are exercising something that a lot of women don't understand, called humility. But at the same time, the sacrifice is, if this is something of any importance, even if it's just minor importance, she's not just going to be wrong in her head and in your head. She's going to screw something up. And maybe you have to let her fall. Maybe you have to let her suffer the consequences. Maybe you have to let other people suffer the consequences so that there is not a 10 years war over that day that you told her that she was wrong. Right? Which really, that's men going overboard for gynocentrism. But the reason behind it is because women go overboard for narcissism. Another way to describe gynocentrism is female narcissism, societal female narcissism. When we go back to those ancient stories and different religions, like the ones I know, the best are the Bible stories because that's what I was raised in. People look at the original sin, Adam and Eve, and the apple and everything, and all the things that people get out of that story about who should be in charge and all that. A lot of times they miss the point that the trigger inside of Eve for choosing to believe the serpent instead of believing God was ego, narcissism, vanity. Vanity is the devil's favorite sin. And it's unfortunately women's most frequently committed, right? You'll be like God. You'll be special. You'll be wise. You're not going to die from eating this. You're going to learn all kinds of things that God doesn't want you to know. You deserve, right? You deserve that knowledge. And Eve decided she deserved, and she ate the apple. And then she wasn't content to have sinned on her own. She couldn't be the only person that did something wrong. So she gave it to Adam. And because Adam may have been gynocentric, and also he was right there and he saw that, like the serpent said, she ate the apple and she didn't die. And I know it wasn't a literal apple, by the way. But therefore, that must have been a lie. Well, God didn't say instantly.
Yeah.
But he ate it. And now they both have consumed from the tree of knowledge, and the rest of the story is known. But it was ego, it was vanity that got that all started. The same thing that drives women to spend between $100 and $300 a month on makeup and fake fingernails and fake boobies and fake butt cheeks and fake hair and fake eyelashes, fake height, high-heeled shoes, new clothes, even if you have a whole closet full of clothes, that stuff that makes your waist thinner and your butt look bigger and your lips look fatter and that's just that's the women that don't go and get procedures done, plastic surgery, or have that thing that sucks your lips out like a duck's bill, or Botox in your face. This industry that caters to women by telling them that they're not pretty enough, but they could be if they would just spend, this many thousands of dollars. It's vanity. And it is the biggest downfall of humanity that we cater to women's vanity. We have more compassion for women's need to feed their vanity than we do for men's need to eat, sleep somewhere safe and warm, and maybe have access to utilities and medicine. Like, more money gets put into research on how to make women prettier than solving the homeless problem, figuring out how to help get guys who are disadvantaged because they're mentally ill or they're addicted to drugs or they're down on their luck for some other reason, off the street and into a better situation. 75% of the homeless, 95% of the unsheltered homeless. And, nobody gives enough of a flying fuck to say maybe we should do some research into how to curb this problem that's affecting these men so that they can have better lives. Nope, we want to find out how to make women look younger. We want to figure out how to make women's asses look fatter. Make women look like if they bend over too far forward, they're going to fall.
Which, not too ironically, the things that women do to make themselves look younger eventually age them and make them look older.
Yeah, true. Well, and do you know what Botox is?
Yes, botulinum.
Yep, it's attenuated botulism.
Mm-hmm.
It's the most toxic, naturally occurring substance known to man.
Yeah.
People
it's the word I taught my kids to use when they were little as a substitute for a cuss word because it sounds like one, but it isn't. So, instead of, like you hit your thumb with a hammer instead of yelling, fuck, you go, botulism. It worked for a few years. They all know fuck now. But they're adults. They're all, over 25. So 2 of them are over 30. I'm old. So yeah, harmful gender attitudes and social norms. And then we have the last thing we'll go over tonight. Dangerous social and dating behavior. We talked a little bit about that already, right? But this one they say, the manosphere teaches young men how to manipulate women into sex. Okay, so remember, in their first paragraph, incels are the manosphere. So this is their third paragraph. In the third paragraph, pickup artists are the manosphere. Do you have any idea the size of the gap between incels and pickup artists?
Well, clearly they don't.
Damned if you do, damned if you don't. Calculated in the perfect possible way.
Yeah.
So how do we find the middle ground between damned if you do and damned if you don't? Just don't do anything. Oh, wait, that counts as don't. That's also damned. So do, but also people. Don't. And make sure you don't run into any icks, because those are also damned. Damned if you do, damned if you don't. Damned if you try to find a middle ground and it happens to be an ick. You might just get damned at every possible avenue, gentlemen.
You know what really gives me the ick? Women who get upset at men for doing normal things.
Yeah.
Like that really, something's wrong with that. It's like watching somebody bite their fingernails back so far that they bleed and then keep on going. Stop! I had somebody tweeted a picture of somebody else's tweet, a screenshot of somebody else's tweet, where she had said, never date men that have hobbies. Because, the idea of men having personal interests in ways to, use their creativity, like somehow that gave her the ick.
God.
What if your hobby is pleasing women? Oh, that makes you a PUA.
She's on social media.
What if your hobby is not pleasing women? Oh, that makes you an incel. What if your hobby...
But she's on social media, which is a hobby for women.
Mm-hmm.
It's attention seeking. Like I do this. I'll cultivate attention in order to be able to post about issues that I think people don't pay enough attention to. But a lot of women do this with, pictures of their butt or pictures of their dinner or they figure out a way to put their tits and their dinner in the same picture. It's really clever.
So I might call that a fetish, but when women do it, it's not a fetish; it's a hobby. But it's not a hobby either, because hobbies are icky. So when women do it, they're just living their lives. Come on, gentlemen, just let women live their lives.
Influencers, like, there are some influencers that make money, but the majority don't make very much money, and dedicate a shit ton of energy into what they're doing. You know, political influencers at least have a cause. They have a reason. Like, you know, we see things that need to be changed in society, and we talk about it because we want other people to understand about it. And then when they go and engage with the civic system, they engage with those understandings, those new understandings in mind. And that's so political influencers are at least activists to some degree. You know, and most don't get rich like Rush Limbaugh. Most have other jobs. Some have two jobs besides their influencer thing. Social influencers are a whole other deal. Like, some of them, again, they make a lot of ad money and stuff. A lot of them don't, and they really are just doing it for the dopamine hits they get when they see how many people liked or shared their comments. And you know, when I look at my analytics, I don't look so much at who liked and shared or how many people liked and shared. I look at how many people saw it, because if it's an idea and I'm trying to get an idea across, that's the important number. But if you're, you know, trying to get approval for the presentation of your peanut butter and jelly sandwich or whatever you had for lunch, then the important button is the likes, right? The like button suddenly becomes your lifeline. You're tapping a vein trying to get more likes in there as quickly as you can, for those dopamine hits. And people will be addicted to that shit. But you know, and of course, you know, these are these women with this hobby of seeking attention for things that are kind of irrelevant. Nobody else gives a flying fuck what you had for lunch. Unless you're going to present something that they might want a recipe for and they might want to cook at home, and you could share that and say, here's how to do this. It's really yummy. You should try it. Or let me cook some for you sometime. You know, oh no, I think I just told women to make people sandwiches. Talking about peanut butter sandwiches. I'm sexist. I make good sandwiches. Not as good as the ones my husband makes. But yeah, nobody gives a flying fuck what you had for lunch, right? But that dopamine hit, that hobby, you know, you don't even realize you're using your hobby to bitch about guys' hobbies. You don't even realize you're doing the thing that you're criticizing, right? So this idea of the manosphere teaching young men how to manipulate women into sex. Women use sex to manipulate men into economic support. And
that too can become a career. Like, so many of the hobbies that women find it icky in men, these hobbies can become careers. I'm going to put my hand up right now. Like, my hobbies were making music and making silly videos, and they are currently my career. And there are so many of us, like that like to do remedial jobs, like being a postman or being a McDonald's worker, and we do that shit while we work on our hobbies. And if we're really good at our hobbies, then we can turn those hobbies into careers. And women do the same. A lot of women do the same. Unfortunately, a lot of women, like you say, their hobbies are telling people what they had for lunch. And I guess that can become hobby. The hobby. There are a lot of career. There are a lot of cooking channels on the internet or indeed the television where people can not just tell people what they've had for lunch, but tell people how they cooked it and how you can cook it too. And yeah, so almost anything you can do as a hobby can become a career. I'm struggling to think of anything that couldn't, other than just telling people how you feel and how much you fucking hate men. Oh wait, even that can become a hobby. Well, it can become a career, an academic career, no less. There are countless women who have tenure at universities just telling everyone about how much they hate men. So yeah, literally any hobby can become a career. So what's your fucking problem? Other than just trying to prevent people from turning their hobby into a career. Like, be supportive. How difficult is it, ladies, to be supportive of someone's interest? Because that's all a hobby is. It's an interest that can rise from a personal interest to a career that can actually sustain you and maybe even make millions, maybe even billions of dollars. I mean, think of all the billionaires in the world. They were people who began engaging in a hobby that didn't make them any money at first, but then ended up making them billions of dollars. I mean, that's the only difference between a hobby and a career. It's how much the hobbyist is supported in their hobby. So fucking support people. This is not difficult. Ugh.
Yeah. Lauren, did you have something? You were unmuted?
No, I'm sorry. I was coughing.
I wanted to make sure before I jumped in. But one of my I've had a couple of careers. I had a career in retail. I can call it that because I've worked in various retail outlets, anywhere from bottom rung to just below store management for over the course of about 30 years time. And I did the same thing with photography. I had a photography career. And I recently got a reminder of how much fun that was, how much I enjoyed it. Before I moved, and I'm not known in the area where I live for my work, and so finding more work here is very difficult. It's a very competitive area. Lots of photographers in the Dayton metro area. So I relied more on the retail thing. But my father was who taught me photography. Started teaching me when I was a little kid because he was an educator and his hobby was photography. And he did turn it into a money-making hobby. He was, in fact, he had a career as an educator. He also had a career as a journalist. And he had a career as a wedding and portrait and commercial photographer. He also was a coach. And he ran the yearbook and photography club at the school where he taught. And so he did a lot of things. So somebody tells men that their job, their primary job, is all they should be doing and everything else should be dedicated to their wives. I'll tell you how my mom handled my dad's hobbies. She learned photography from him. And she discovered how much she enjoyed it. She's artistic. She was artistic. She painted. She played piano. My dad played by ear. My mom played from reading music. Dad couldn't read music. I can't read music very well. I played by ear for years. I don't know if I still could. It's been a long time. I'm trying to get back into it. But, and they did that together too, but they did photography together. They ran a business together. They did artwork together. They learned photography together, and they taught my brother and me photography together. And it was one of the many different ways that they bonded with each other. And they both had hobbies, each one that the other didn't have. Little hobbies, like my dad built model cars, and he did a little bit of sculpting and stuff like that. And Mom didn't get into that, but she got very much into baking, and she sewed. Dad didn't sew, so they had their own hobbies. But they shared hobbies that they could take a shared interest in, and they appreciated each other's hobbies. Mom enjoyed having Dad's cars on display. Dad wore things that Mom made for him. We all did. My mom was an excellent tailor. But I had stuff people thought when we went places and people didn't know us, they would look at the stuff that my mother made and they thought we were rich. We were really not. But people did. There was one lady that yelled at us because she thought we were from Cleveland Heights. And at the time, I don't know if it is still, but at the time that was a hoity-toity wealthy area. So, in any case, hobbies can be something that you can bond over. But women have this tendency to be like, well, it's a self-interest. If a guy has any interest in himself, if he's not completely subservient to me, that gives me the ick. Like, why do you want to make yourself so responsible for a guy that he has to be a robot that serves only you, and you have to tell him what to do, and you have to take complete control over his personality and his life and that kind of, like, can't you just enjoy being loved by a whole person and loving him back? And apparently many women can't, right? So it's not just this idea that men manipulate women into sex. Women manipulate men. When men will start dating a woman, and they'll decide whether or not they can trust her and partner with her for life, whether this is the woman that might raise their children if they're going to have children, or whether that they can trust that this woman will stay with them and not leave, and not take half their shit, right? Women will start dating a guy and he immediately becomes a fixer-upper project, right? She's madly head over heels in love with him. He's absolutely perfect. And therefore, there's about 37 different things she needs to change about him, including who his friends are and his entire wardrobe and what things he does for fun and how he talks, right? And his haircut, and like some other laundry list of bullshit things that as soon as she's done molding and shaping him into the different guy than that guy she got together with, she's going to complain that she doesn't recognize him anymore. Then she's going to leave him and take half his shit. But yeah, the manosphere is dangerous, guys, because the manosphere teaches young men, how to manipulate women into sex. So I'm assuming they're talking about pickup artists. I think pickup artists are dipshits because they are advising men to do something that is not healthy for them to do. It's not safe. It gets you into trouble, and you're putting yourself at risk for all of the things we talked about at the beginning of the show, right? But then they go on. Even gendered hate speech.
I was just going to say, what's not a hobby? Being in the UN.
Yeah.
I don't know how the fuck anyone goes from a lowly status to being in the UN, because no one has a hobby of dictating what everyone in the world should do, and then they suddenly get a career from telling everyone in the world what they should do. So yeah, UN women, if anything, you should be pointing the fucking crosshairs on yourself and asking how the fuck you came to be, eh? When your shit is not a hobby, it's just pure power grabbing. You bunch of cunts. Sorry, carry on, Hannah.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead. No, that was good.
I've finished. That's all I need to say. No one of these people hate hobbies, because what they do was never a hobby. It was always just fucking megalomaniacs pursuing their megalomania.
Yep. Yeah, so they go on to say, even gendered hate speech is becoming normalized, making its way into schoolyards and workplaces. When I was a kid, somebody bought me a t-shirt that said, anything boys can do, girls can do better. And I wore it to school one day, because I was a kid. Kids don't think these things through. And the biggest argument that ever happened in the history of our school happened that day on the playground over that t-shirt. I don't think I ever wore it again after that. But there was the question, what's the evidence? What can, girls do that boys can't? And of course, girls all went in, well, girls can have babies. And boys rightfully pointed out, not till you grow up, not till you get older. You can't have a baby right now. We're in the 3rd grade. You can't even conceive. And we, unfortunately, a lot of us all knew the birds and the bees by that time, before we got our sex education in school. But of all things, the one thing the girls had to concede was the boys could pee standing up and not get any on themselves. And most girls can't do that. They don't have the muscle control. It's possible to do that, but you have to be able to fire fast and hard and get it all out at once. But
it's the same with boys, by the way. I mean, if you lose muscle control, then
then you're gonna pee on your feet.
You're gonna pee on the seat, and then you'll have to. Well, yes.
Yep. But yeah. By the end of the argument, it was conceded that boys could pee standing up and girls can't, and they didn't even concede that guys are stronger, because at that age, not very many of them were. Like now, 2 years later, they would have had no choice because the guys could have proved it. I can pick you up, but you can't pick me up. Would be like about half the guys in the class could have said that to about 3/4 of the gals in the class, and been right. But yeah, so gendered hate speech, right? And what they think is gendered hate speech is on this page here. And this is an interview, so we're not going to go through the whole thing. But where she said it, the most common form of attack, she says, on women's rights defenders and activists, women in politics, journalists, is harassment and defamation, including criminalization, fabricated charges against women's human rights defenders, arbitrarily detaining them, turning them into political prisoners. So that's their idea of gendered hate speech becoming the norm, and there's nothing in here that demonstrates that it is becoming common on school campuses. It's all about adult women, and in particular, women like the women of the UN, right? But I just want to remind everybody, when they talk about criminalization and detainment and stuff, we've had bomb threats. We've had groups try to get us kicked out of places, and they did succeed in one place by mobbing the administrators of the event on social media, and essentially getting our presence there criminalized in terms of the rules of the location, right? But we've had bomb threats. The men's rights movement. We've had We've had to change venues for our events because of bomb threats. We've had many men in the organization have faced attacks where women have tried to accuse them of harassment or accuse them of saying and doing things they didn't do. We have a consistent false allegation against the movement and against incels where feminists have a list of men who were, those fucked in the head violent criminals, often guys that were raised without a father, by the way, who have engaged in mass killings that haven't got a connection with the men's rights movement. They haven't got a connection necessarily with the incel population either, the incel community. But they refer to them as incels and therefore men's rights activists, which there's some overlap in the groups, two groups, but not as much as you would think, because a lot of incels don't have that much hope. But and they've claimed that they are representative of us and that their attacks were strictly misogynistic, even if they killed men. Right? Those man-killing misogynists. But yeah, gendered hate speech against women, right? Hashtag kill all men on Twitter was prevalent, prominent, frequently used, treated like, oh, it's just a joke, bro. You shouldn't be so upset, bro. This is why men shouldn't be allowed to live. Men are so humorless, bro. Hashtag kill all men. I mean, there are not terms targeting women like the term mansplaining, which was originally coined to mock men for talking about having the same complaints that women have on some levels. For instance, men can be sexual assault victims, men can be domestic abuse victims, and when they experience that, it's just as painful and harmful. It's just as much a violation of their person, and it's just as toxic for the community, sometimes worse, right? So when men talk about what they think of these circumstances, how they feel about these circumstances, what changes they would like to see made, what help they might need, feminists accused them of mansplaining. We already know what it's like to be abuse victims. All women are abuse victims. The patriarchy, blah, blah, blah. How dare you take our spotlight, our victim spotlight. Men who have been stabbed, hit with frying pans, poisoned, shot, had other men sicked on them by women, men who have been drugged and raped by women, men who have been drugged and robbed by women. Yeah, that's where the term mansplaining originally came from. Now they talk about it like it's, trying to explain things to women that they already know because they must not know because they're women. But that's bullshit, right? They had to come up with something to redeem the term. Manspreading, right? A woman can sit on the bus and spread out bags 2 feet on either side of her, taking up 3 seats, or put her feet up on the seat, and she's not taking up too much space. But if a man's knees are more than 2 inches apart, he's manspreading. Right? That's not hateful, right? Women will suggest that men have to be genitally mutated and scarred in order to be attractive to women. Can you imagine if women said that? If men said that about women? How do women react when you start talking about female genital mutilation? But the idea that you have to cut off a chunk of skin that, when you reach adulthood, it would be the size of a credit card, remove that much skin from your body, during infancy, so that later on in life you'll be attractive to women. They don't consider that hate speech. Right? The idea that it's just not the same to sexually victimize a man as it is to sexually victimize a woman, that men are lesser victims when they're raped or when they're abused by their partner. Feminists promote that on a regular basis. That's not hate speech. That's not a dangerous social norm. It's not a negative stereotype of men that they're being whiny if they complain when their wife hits them with a frying pan. That they're being that they have boundary issues if the discussion is about sexual victims and their psychological damage, and they tell their story and they talk about what they went through. Like, how can we, as a population in the world, continue that and consider ourselves to be civilized and enlightened? You say, we teach women, our society, our whole world population teaches women and girls that the absolute worst thing that can ever happen to you in your whole life, worse than death, is being raped. And I'm here to tell you, it does suck. It is awful. It is a horrible experience. It's humiliating and painful and can be scary as hell, depending on what the details are. Right? Like, somebody is violent toward you or uses a weapon, that's terrifying. And I'm not afraid to admit that it's terrifying enough that it can be paralyzing, right? Because you're afraid you might die. Not just because you're afraid they're going to force intimacy on you, because you're afraid you might die. It's not worse than death. It can be horrible and not be worse than death. And similarly, the idea of being pregnant after being raped. Imagine this scenario, right? Imagine if the minute the baby's delivered, the rapist gets to come in and take the baby away, and you can never see the baby again. That's what happens when a man is raped and his rapist conceives. She has custody at birth. And unless she goes after him for child support, he may not even get an opportunity to get paternity tested. Especially not if he isn't recognized by the state as a victim. If no charges are brought, no trial, no penalty, he just has to deal with it. And his kid, might be being raised by a sexual predator, and there's nothing you can do about it. You think that's not traumatic?
And she gets to take his foreskin. She gets to take your child and his foreskin. And those are among the two worst things that can happen to a human being. Taking your child and taking parts of his body along with them. Yep. Present to me anything that's worse than either of those two things.
Being murdered. Well, that's the only thing. But I mean, being murdered is ultimately the worst thing that can happen to a person. Although, honestly, if you had, being murdered isn't worse than losing your child. Being murdered might be worse than losing some flesh, even if it's important flesh. If you can survive without it. Like, if somebody said, "Give me, let me cut off your foot, or I'm going to kill you," I would give up my foot. I would rather stay alive. Right? And when someone said, "You better sit still and take it," I did. Because I didn't want to get shot. And that's the way it is. Right? You know what's worse than death when you're willing to tolerate it in order to avoid death. But I would rather die than lose one of my kids. I would rather die 1,000 times than lose one of my kids. I've had nightmares about that, about losing one of my kids. It's the most horrible thing, and it haunts you. The nightmare that when you wake up and you realize it didn't really happen, and you're relieved, the nightmare still haunts you for years. Like, my heart goes out to parents who are alienated from their children, and to parents whose children have died. Like, I just cannot fathom how horrible that must be. That is the worst thing that can happen to a human being, to lose your children. And it's routinely done to men. Routinely, on the basis of false allegations of being dangerous to them, with no basis at all for the allegations, not even actions on the part of the man. Just, he's a man, therefore he's dangerous. The National Organization for Women in the United States, several organizations in Canada that are feminist organizations, and UN Women now, because we just read about it last week, have spent years, decades, opposing shared parenting rights of different types, from joint custody to shared parenting, and now to equally shared parenting. They've opposed that on the basis of demonizing wholesale men in general, and especially fathers, as deadbeats and abusers who don't love their kids and just want to take them away from the mother and just want to avoid child support and are going to beat them to death at the first opportunity. Even though, statistically, the majority of child maltreatment, whether it's a physical abuse, sexual abuse, psychological abuse, neglect, it's female perpetrated. Women do it. And approximately 70% of children who are killed by one parent acting alone using one of those types of abuse are usually neglect, but not always. Also violence. They're killed by their mother, not their father. So the stereotype is bullshit. And feminists know that it's bullshit, but they're still using it. Is that not gendered hate speech? Calling men something that they are not in order to take their children away from them?
Well, as I've often heard, men are killed all the time, but because they're killed by men, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't count.
Men don't count as victims as long as they're killed by other men. So if female babies are killed by women, that doesn't matter, right?
Yeah, but the victims are primarily boys. That's the other thing. The majority, and it's not a big gap between the sexes, but boys edge girls out in terms of being more often killed by their mothers. So that's, yeah, and it's usually kids under the age of a year. So infants. The greatest perpetrators of infanticide are women. And that's not counting abortion. Abortion, if you throw that in, I asked Grok. Let me see if I don't think I'm not signed in on my Google account. Oh shit. Hell is this? So you guys probably can't. You guys probably can't. I opened up my other browser, and it it opened up a YouTube video that I had opened at some point in the past. There we go. So I asked Grok. Let me see if I can just share this link here. Right. And the way I phrased this question, I phrased it this way because normally, murder is defined, homicide is defined or murder is defined as deliberate, not accidental, non-negligent killing. Homicide with an asterisk, negligent homicide is a different thing, right? And accidental homicide, where there wasn't anything you could do to prevent it, sometimes isn't prosecuted. Self-defense isn't prosecuted. You don't get prosecuted for being a soldier in a war unless you commit a war crime and lose. Or your side is more moral than the other side. So and a death penalty, the government isn't considered a murderer for killing people, right? So I excluded those things, right? If we defined homicides as the deliberate killing of any human being of any age by another human being, excluding things that most people wouldn't think of as homicide, in other words. And we counted all strictly elective abortions, that being, not for medical reasons to protect the mother from, a medically detrimental outcome that the pregnancy was going to cause. What percentage of homicides worldwide would be female perpetrated? And Grok went through a whole series looked at traditional homicides, elective abortions, global statistics on male and female perpetrated elective abortions. Obviously, if we counted the mother as the perpetrator and not the abortionist as the perpetrator, because the mother is contracting a contract killer there. And then went through various key inputs here. And even the fact that other forms of killing are mostly done by men, traditional homicides, less than 0.7% of the total are negligible compared to elective abortions, so the female percentage hovers near 99.4%, regardless of minor variations. This holds even if excluding fetal sex, as the query specifies, a human being of any age, including fetuses, or adjusting for underreporting. So even with underreported homicide, 99.4%, so over 99% of human death in the world is caused by women. Of humans killing other humans. Sorry, not human death. Although the leading cause of human death in the world is being aborted. It edges out even cardiopulmonary conditions. So it's quite a factor. And in some areas, girls are more likely to be aborted for various reasons, and in some areas, boys are more likely to be aborted for various reasons. But in every pregnancy that is aborted electively, in other words, the mother chooses it, the perpetrator is the mother, not some stranger, not someone robbing the house, not partner violence. And that's 3 in 10 pregnancies that's happening with, by the way, because I checked those statistics too. 3 in 10 pregnancies worldwide ends in an elective abortion. So all of this stereotyping men as violent, all of this stereotyping men as dangerous and men as natural killers, where women would never do anything like that. Well, if you count abortion, There's a whole different story there. And there's a lot of us that do, because it is a living human organism that is being killed in that instance. Even AI can recognize that the magical vagina, the birth canal, does not bestow humanity, the being a member of the human species, onto the baby on its way through. It was human and it was alive before it popped out, whether male or female. And it is genetically distinct from the mother because it also has the father's DNA. So yeah, it's a horrible fact, but it is a fact. And yet, who gets demonized as violent? And women who, there's another thing that you got to understand about this, right? Just like the fact that the majority of violent crime is committed by a small percentage of mostly repeat offenders, the same is true about abortion. A lot of abortion is done by a small percentage of repeat offenders. And they're very blasé about it. I had a colleague at work when I was in retail that, she was young and she was 18 years old and she had already had 4 abortions. And she talked about it like, you would talk about getting your toenails clipped. She had no consideration for what she had done at all. Didn't care. Didn't feel bad about it. Didn't have feelings about it. Any feelings about it at all. Because she didn't think of them as human beings. So there you go. But yeah, it's men who are dangerous, right? You'd rather be in the woods alone with a bear than a man. A night motorcyclist says get 9 abortions and the 10th one is free. No, it doesn't work that way. And by the way, in the profession, there are more female practitioners than male, and most of the staff are female as well. So it is a mostly female-run industry that does this baby killing, and then those parts do get sold off. That's been proved. So there you go. But we have this perception, right? This belief that it's men who are dangerous to children. More and more school teachers are getting busted. Female school teachers are getting busted for raping their students. And of course, the news media doesn't report it that way, right? The 20-year-old school teacher. I saw one headline in which they actually said attractive school teacher. The attractive rapist. They didn't call her a rapist. Attractive school teacher jailed for, it was like illicit relationship or some shit like that with student. And then you find out, you look at the story and you find out the student was like 13. Not an illicit relationship. This is the 13-year-old. He cannot consent. You are a rapist, lady. But the news media doesn't say that. They don't call her a rapist, right? And they mention she's attractive. Can you imagine? Attractive man breaks into women's houses and has sex with them. No, they would never report it that way, right? The big letters.
Can you say that now?
Rapist!
But here in the UK, it doesn't sound a million miles away from what's going to happen a few inches from now.
Yeah. Attractive refugee from Fuckistan. Jeez.
It's a highly subjective term, isn't it?
Yeah, but that's the thing. It's usually a female privilege. Like you completely and utterly obliterate the boundaries of a poor, innocent child. And the news media says, oh, but she was attractive. It's okay. Like, fuck, no, it wasn't. That kid's going to be messed up for the rest of his life. He is now up to 44 times more likely to abuse chemical substances, up to 14 times more likely to commit suicide. He has a higher likelihood of developing a laundry list of mental health conditions, a lower likelihood of graduating, lower likelihood of going on to college, a lower likelihood of being able to form a productive relationship, a loyal and functional relationship with a partner in adulthood. If he's gay, he might be confused about that. If he's straight, he might be confused about that. And there's also a slightly higher chance that he might become sexually aggressive than there is that any other boy in his class would, or any girl.
In the event of that,
he's been sexually abused. Same thing if a student sexually abuses a girl child, she may have those same sequelae.
But in any case, it's the boy who's been raped one generation before, or the boy who's been raped one generation after, who will go on to be blamed.
Yep.
For the rape culture, or whatever the fuck it is we're calling it now. And it'll just go on and on forever until we can, address the idea that sometimes boys are raped too. Well, sometimes women are rapists too, because that's the thing that seems to be missing.
Yeah. And in the long run, it does create a cycle, and it actually creates a couple of cycles, because there's another thing that happens that's less reported on with victims of childhood sexual abuse. And sometimes we go on to become what feminists like to refer to as poly-victims, which basically means your ability to defend your boundaries was erased. You don't understand that you have a right to your own boundaries. Other people's boundaries are not the only boundaries that are allowed to exist. And you can also say, no further than this line. I don't want to do this thing. I don't want to participate. I don't want to be touched or taken advantage of. And you don't protect yourself. You don't have situational awareness. You don't have, you don't recognize bad character. You don't vet for character in the people that you associate with. You may compromise yourself with substances in situations where the people that you're with are untrustworthy and things like that. And you find yourself getting victimized again and again, not just sexually, but in a lot of other ways as well. People talk you into spending money on them that you can't afford, or going out of your way and spending labor on them that you can't afford. People take advantage of you in every way that they can figure out how to get something from you, until you learn later in life, either from therapy or from, I lucked out. I came across a community of people that recognized the pattern and said, hey, you can tell people no. You can put the kibosh to behaviors like that. You don't have to spend all your money on other people, and end up in trouble financially. You don't have to spend all your time on other people and end up in the hospital, right? And so, yeah, becoming a poly victim is another pattern.
And yes, I'm going to get highly controversial now on both sides of the aisle, but yes, maybe this does apply to some of the quote-unquote fighting age men who are being rushed out of these third world countries into these Western countries. And yes, a lot of them do seem to be quite rapey, but how many of us have asked why these men are being ejected from these countries in the first place? And yes, maybe it's because they're a bit rapey, but how did they become so rapey in the first place? And then you have to ask, how did they become so rapey in the first place? And you might say it's because of their culture. It's a culture in which men are naturally taught to be rapey. Is it?
And who teaches them that?
Indeed, who rapes them into that? But then you have to ask the question of, is it possible that third world women are quite rapey? No, third world women are just total victims. It's in the third world, it is only women who get raped. No, heavens to Betsy, no. Women never rape men in the third world. That would, no. Yes. Yes. I mean, no. I mean, yes. I mean...
there was a thread on Twitter a while back, I think I talked about this last week too, where a bunch of guys talked about the fact that their first experience was a woman forcing herself on them. And we're talking their first experience being when they were underage, junior high, high school, early high school. And a significant portion of the thread, the comments in the thread from guys who had some story or another of a woman who was old enough to be their grandmother or their mom's older sister, imposing herself on them when they were that age to teach them how to be a man. A lot of them were black. A lot of them were African, actually. And because of the dominance of stories from black African men and black American men in that thread, Twitter deleted it. This was before Musk. Before Musk, by the way, can be abbreviated BM, just like bowel movement. Twitter was shit before Musk. But that thread, I had my attention drawn to it when it was just starting out. And I would think I got to the end of the post, and it, you read these guys' experiences, and it's just heartbreaking, and you won't, like, I'm in tears reading this post, and I'm like, geez, I can't believe how many there are here. And you refresh the page, and there's more. And there kept being more and more until you couldn't even trace the thread back up to the original post where one guy told the story and stated his suspicion this was more common than people thought, and then asked. And yeah, it was a hell of a thread. And it was a hell of a wake-up call. I didn't realize it happened that much to boys. I didn't realize it happened that much to other girls, much less that it happened that much to boys. And here it looks like it's a lot more common for boys because there's never a misconception that a 13-year-old girl is being done a favor by an adult who takes sexual advantage of her, right? Nobody, at least in the US, nobody argues that a 13-year-old girl is better off because some 40-year-old guy raped her. Nobody makes that argument. But they do when it's a 13-year-old boy and a 40-year-old woman. And that's disgusting. And they don't just make that argument. It's normalized.
It goes beyond the West that we like to talk about. this is why we at Honey Badger Radio are fighting such an uphill battle, because it's because it goes beyond the left and the right. Here in the West, the left like to argue that straight white cis men are the ones who rape everyone, and on the right, they like to argue that it's just the foreign men who rape everyone. But in all cases, it's men are the problem and women are the victims. And like we're like here saying, you know, it's actually all over the world, in which male victims are overlooked, and female victims are
female perpetrators are overlooked.
It's just generally assumed that all victims of sexual assault or any kind of assault are females, and that is perhaps why millions of men are being ejected from the third world, because in the third world they don't give a shit about men either. Not especially not the men who have been raped by women. What? No, surely no third world men would get raped by women. Yeah. Actually, yes. This is a worldwide problem. It's not just in the West, not just because we've become a decadent society that can afford to give women all of these secessions as to being the only victims. No, it's the same in the third world. No matter how poor a society or a country is, there is this tendency to assume that all women are victims and all men are perpetrators. And if a man becomes a perpetrator, it can't possibly be because he is the victim of a woman. Dare I say, women. I know it's hard to even talk about women as a collective in the third world, as a collective that is in any way responsible for any of these atrocities. But this is the double-edged sword of ideologies and religions, or any given ideology. The more decadent any given society or religion becomes, the more they tend to apply these victim mentalities to whoever they are designed, not necessarily evolutionarily designed, but societally designed to apply these victim mentalities. And yeah, it's so often a shortcoming of the right as well as the left to assume that in these third world countries, in these faraway countries, it's men oppressing women from the top to the bottom, from the political level at the top to the domestic level at the bottom. That in some way it's men oppressing women. It's men who rape women. But yeah, this is why we remain at the bottom of the pecking order, folks, because we're here letting you know that even in the dustiest parts of the third world, there are men getting raped by women. There are especially boys getting raped by women, and those boys are the ones who develop these antisocial tendencies, these criminal tendencies, and those boys become the men who those third world societies don't want anymore. And so those men are the ones who get put on the boats. Well, those men are the ones who look for the boats so that they can go to other countries. And
it's a little of both. They want to escape, and their country wants to get rid of them. It's just like when the U.S. had that 1 foot on the beach policy for Cuban refugees, that if they got 1 foot on the beach, they were able to stay, or at least apply for asylum. Then Castro emptied out his prisons and his mental institutions of mostly men that were in one way or another dysfunctional and put them on boats and sent them here. And so, in addition to actual refugees from Cuba, we got those people.
So yeah, the misandry problem, ladies and gentlemen, is not limited to our own society. It is global.
Yep.
And it's largely because, well, I don't want to blame the West for everything, but the fact that the West has inflicted this decadency on everyone. I mean, for the same reason, the reason Indians keep dumping so much plastic in the River Ganges is because the West has supplied them with so much plastic. Yeah, that's not to say that Indians are blameless in all these things. They weren't ready for the idea that they would have a civilization covered in so much plastic. Like the West knew how to deal with the plastic in the first place because they had these ways of disposing of it, recycling it perhaps. And there's a whole other fucking story about how recycling doesn't work. But in the same way, the East wasn't prepared to deal with the feminist bullshit that was inflicted upon them by the West. And yeah, we've done our best to just eject ourselves from the East when they said, no, we don't want you anymore, British Empire. We want to be independent. And we went, all right, bye. And yes, we did. We did extract most of our culture from these places. But we left the feminism there. The few people that we left there to try and be, diplomatic peacemakers. Alas, most of them stayed there trying to enact what they thought was the best part of the West, and what they thought was the best part of the West was the feminism and the producing endless amounts of disposable plastic. Do you see the line of comparison I'm trying to draw? The third world East didn't know how to deal with plastic, and they didn't know how to deal with feminism. They took it too far. And that's what we need to extract, right? That's what we need. That's what we really need to decolonize, right? When it comes to India and Africa and all these other places, we've spent a century or so saying sorry for applying all the things that we applied, but we need to start saying sorry for all the plastic, and sorry for all the feminism, and sorry for all the democracy. That's taking it that far, folks.
Feminism
they weren't prepared for any of this.
Feminism hit
I,
India.
for one, am sorry.
Yeah, feminism hit India like a dirty bomb. It what it did there is so bad that like the rate at which men in India are committing suicide to get away from it is horrendous. It's absolutely insane. Like the last number I saw was something like 1 man every 8 seconds, and which is just an appalling idea. But it's had two specific effects. One of them is the breakup of marriages and families. And the other one is the withholding of food from men in poverty situations. That both of those are incredibly dire because the way the families are breaking up, their anti-dowry law was written in such a way that entire families are getting jailed on false allegations. And in terms of abuse, because women are able to obtain money and obtain property by leveling dowry abuse allegations, there's a high rate of false allegations. And then they're also able to do that, and families are able to get compensation for leveling rape allegations. So if a family has a particular marriage planned for their daughter and she runs off with some other guy, they just level a rape allegation to get her back, and they get her back, and they can go after the guy for compensation, even if he isn't criminally charged. And so they have a rate of false rape allegations in India that is somewhere between 65% of allegations and 85% of allegations being false. And the reason that there's that span is that 20% of allegations are accounted for by parents making the allegations in objection to elopements. And so and there's another phenomenon there, women making allegations of rape because of breach of promise to marry. And so a guy, they feel that a guy should marry them, whether he's promised to or not. And they have sex with him thinking that it's going to cement the relationship and that's going to make him marry them. And then he doesn't. And then they file a rape charge. And guys have trouble defending themselves against that. And so what ends up happening then is, men are committing suicide over being falsely accused, and having their families go through everything that they go through because of it. And it doesn't help that India's an honor culture, in that a man who is accused of something like that will get dragged out of his home by his neighbors and beaten to death. So it is a hell of a situation. And the way that they've handled the issue of breach of promise to marry, leading to so many false rape allegations, is that they, if I understand correctly, they've passed a law now that if you promise to marry in order to get sex and then you don't marry, then that's rape in India now, so that they won't be labeled false rape accusers when that happens. But I don't know if the woman has to actually prove or not that there was a promise, because a lot of women do this thing, right, where they assume, and if the guy isn't on the same page, then he's broken a promise that he didn't even make. But with that, I think I'm going to have to end it because it's almost 10 o'clock. It's actually 9:37 right now, which is pretty late for Brian to keep doing this. And we still have quite a bit of this article to go, so we're not going to finish it today. So we'll start with talking about the digital spaces. And I'm sure we'll probably have a lot to say about that next week. In the meantime, I do not see any super anything. No super chats, no super chows, and no Rumble rants that were paid. But I'm going to read off a super chow from a previous show. Richard Bier, who at that time gave us $5, said, "What do you get for the woman who has everything?" And hearkening back to the beginning of our show, his answer is penicillin. So there you go. And that's the sad truth. In today's situation, penicillin might not do any good. So thanks, guys, for going through this with me, and the great discussion. And it may have wandered, but it wandered in ways that I think are very important to discuss. So that was good. And thanks everybody for listening. And thanks to everybody who works in the background to make HBR Talk happen, especially Brian, who has gone the extra mile to make sure that we can have the vertical YouTube channel and YouTube chat. Good night, all.
Word.
Men's rights activists are machines, dude. Okay? They are literal machines. They are talking point machines. They are impossible to fucking deal with, especially if you have like a couple dudes who have good memory on top of that too. holy shit, you're fucked.